equity mate.
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.
Welcome to another episode of Equity Mates, a podcast that follows our journey of investing. Whether you're an absolute beginner or approaching Warren Buffett status, our aim is to help break down your barriers from beginning to dividend. My name is Bryce, and as always, I'm joined by my equity buddy, Ren. How are you going?
I'm very good, Bryce. I am very excited for this interview. We are joined by an expert investor and entrepreneur who we have spent a lot of time watching on TV, and we're lucky enough to have him on the show today.
That's it. It's our absolute pleasure to welcome Steve Baxter to the studio. Steve, welcome.
Thanks, Bryce. Thanks, Alec. Thanks for having me. Great to be here again. That story.
Well, we might pick that up a bit later. Steve is an Australian investor and entrepreneur living in Brisbane, and as Ren alluded to, many people will know him as one of the sharks on Channel 10's Shark Tank, and we're excited to unpack that. But we're also excited to unpack his life as a serial entrepreneur, investor, and mentor. So we'll start at the top. Steve, your founding story from growing up in rural Queensland to joining the army to being right in the middle of the first tech boom is a great one. So can you just sort of briefly take us through that period of time?
Yeah, so to sort of get in there quite quickly, born in Cloncurry in northwest Queensland, grew up in Emerald and Rockhampton in central Queensland, home of the world's best thermal coal, and don't we need some of that now? When I was 15 years old, joined the army as a boy soldier. They could no longer do that, thankfully, because that's wrong. But signed up a 9-year contract, 15 years old, and did an electronics apprenticeship. That took me to Albury down in Victoria, Wodonga, specifically on the Victorian side of the border. And for 3 years there, then back to Brisbane for 3 years, and Adelaide for 3 years for my 9 years in the military. Got into computing along that way because that's the sort of way electronics was. We were on the edge of what we call discrete components, actually fixing things with soldering irons as opposed to sort of changing modules and reprogramming software. We were right on the edge of that, so it was a weird time to be in that trade. Came across this really weird operating system called Linux through a user group meeting. Figured you could plug some modems in the back of it and have some people dial up and charge them money for the privilege. And that was the dial-up ISP called SCNet, which we operated in the suburbs of Adelaide. That started in November 94. I got out of the army in September 95. My bosses didn't quite appreciate my second job, would be the best description for it. But that's okay, because I didn't ask them if I could do it because I knew they'd say no, so I just went and did it. I got out in 95. Ended up taking on a business partner soon after that. Great mate of mine, Chris. We sold that business in two tranches between 99 and 2000 to Aussie Mail. Most famously at the time was chairman by Malcolm Turnbull. I didn't meet Malcolm until about 2003 though, I have to admit. And then came back to Brisbane, met up with a chap I went to school with, Bevan Slattery, and mum's the best mates. They used to work together. We used to play tennis together. Ended up starting a business called, I did a little bit of consulting for him, I suppose, on some money he was trying to raise. And then we started a business together called Pipe Networks, which we ultimately listed on the ASX in 2005. And then sold that to Aussie Mail. It was a flashback. Sold that to TPG Telecom it settled in March 2010, although it was about a 6-month process. Since then, I've been an investor in early stage, a supporter of and investor in early stage businesses and tech businesses in Australia. I didn't really want to get back into telecoms because I figured the NBN's buggered that up. So I wanted to steer clear of things that made my teeth grind.
Well, plenty to unpack there. Maybe get your thoughts on the NBN a little bit later. But Steve, the way we've
We'll have a separate hour for NBN if you really like. But it's no good. We've lost, right? NBN's won. We've lost. We've remonopolised telecoms in Australia, and we're paying 3 times as much as we should for. Now, I did turn off every sound on my computer. I have no idea where that's coming from. Sorry.
That's all right. We'll keep all this in. But Steve, the way we want to approach this interview is sort of in 3 parts. Steve is a founder, then as an investor, and then finally as a mentor. So starting with your time as a founder, you, as you mentioned there, you started and exited multiple businesses, SCNet, Pipe Networks. What have you learnt about founding and then scaling companies from your time as a founder?
Well, there's two things there. Founding, they're very two separate things for sure. So there's the founding, which is scary. The first time is scary, exciting, scary, the whole thing. And I give a lot of advice, and you mentioned a bit more about the mentoring later on. But the biggest piece of advice I give based on my journey has been just do it. Just, 0 to 1. There's a book, Peter Thiel, is it? I want to say
Peter
0 to 1.
Yeah.
Not really about this, but it's a good analogy. There's a lot to that. There's a lot to be 0 to 1 in that book. But the hardest thing is starting, and then you just get more problems after that. They get somewhat simpler. So get out there and just do it. You never know. Do it with some intelligence. I always tell people things I didn't do along the way is I didn't know enough about just basic bookkeeping. One of those skills, people find this really boring. So what's the one thing you wish you knew beforehand? I wish I knew double entry bookkeeping. The things that make a business go away is running out of money.
Yeah.
That's to be just find a point on. Lots of things cause that, but that's the ultimate cause, the ultimate reason they go broke. So, and how we didn't. That didn't happen to us is probably out of luck in the earlier years because we just weren't aware of things you should be doing, I suppose. So get some technical, get some skills, get some business skills. That's sort of very important. But get in there and start because whatever you start on, you're not going to finish on. It'll change along the way. Call it a pivot, call it whatever you want. It'll end up morphing. That's for sure.
Yeah, I feel so lucky that Bryce and I are starting this business in 2022 rather than when you started SENet in 1994. Just the amount of tools and software platforms that are available to help us, do things like
Xero.
Xero for accounting, or all those website builders and stuff to help you get a website off the ground. I don't want to say it's easier now than it was then. There are always challenges, but it feels a little bit
just
easier.
Different challenges. It's true. We had 65 full-time equivalents, I want to say, in SENet when I sold it. I think 8 of those were programmers, literally C++, literally code programmers. Would sometimes have to modify the Linux kernel because there was bugs in it. It was open source software. But we literally had kernel hackers working for us because we couldn't make it do what we wanted to do. And imagine that nowadays. Nowadays you have Salesforce and all these sort of WYSIWYG tools.
Yeah.
Which is great. Which means you can actually put more intelligent capital into just more productive things. I think it's a benefit, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So starting SENet in 1994 put you right at the forefront of the tech boom. So did you sort of see this disruption coming? Was it right place, right time? What was the sort of moment there? Yeah,
I think both of those things. I mean, right place. Business success is really about timing. Timing is so important. It's probably one of the most important factors. A lot of that, and you can't really control that because a lot of macro stuff that comes into that. I saw one night at a computer user group, I saw someone using a web browser, even before I hadn't even used a graphical interface yet on Linux. And they're actually interacting with the CGI Common Gateway Interface, Standard 1, I think, had just come out. And it just standardized how people could actually write scripts and forms and interact with the computer. And it was just a shocking moment, actually. So that was the moment I knew I had to leap through that. I could see the window open. I had to sort of go through with both feet. But I mean, back then, the biggest companies, one of the biggest companies around, I'm pretty sure it was the guys who did the B&D roller doors. It was actually a roller door company. It was like a garage door roller door company. And they had 10 depots around in Australia and had to communicate through their software. So they ended up building, they're actually one of Australia's larger ISPs at the time. And they never followed through. So they would have done far better from internet than bloody garage doors. But Corinthian doors. It was at Corinthian doors. It was called Corinthian Internet, and it came from this door company. It was really, really weird. So all sorts of TNT, the big transport company, they're one of the biggest networks in Australia at the time, and they were a quasi ISP. It was a weird landscape back then.
Yeah, wow.
I love that idea of timing being so important, and it feels like we look at today, and it feels like the media. There's always talk about the next disruption coming or the emerging technology. AI, machine learning. Recently, it's been blockchain and Web3. For a long time, it's been Internet of Things. It feels like the media are always writing about us being on the cusp of something else, but many of them we never really seem to really get into. Do you look at the world today, the world of technology today, and see a similar opportunity to what you saw with the internet in 1994?
I've probably become quite jaded on technology, to be honest. Technology is there to solve a problem. And there's always, I call it the latest highbrow computer science or network technology. So whether it's, I was there when Java was going to be the last language to rule them all, like a Tolkien type sort of computer language, one language, and that never happened. I was there when WAP, Wide Area Protocol, came out, which is the precursor to what we do with the data on phones now. And that was just screaming disaster. It had government interference in it too, so it was always bound to be a failure to start with. So, look, providing it goes faster, it's cheaper to operate, and when I say cheaper to run, so in terms of, in networks, in terms of bandwidth utilization, in terms of the infrastructure you need to drive it, to your point before about having zeros and all these WYSIWYG websites. I mean, someone else has done that hard work and you just sit on top of these geniuses before us, which is all really good. So providing, if you pick the right people in investment and that they're using the latest in appropriate technology, then that's what you want. There's people out there who do back technologies and they're deep technology investors, and I'm like, I don't know. I tell one of my NBN rants is I tell the story that we started SENet. We started with 14.4K modems, and then we literally had to change them all that to go to 28.8K. Then we had to change them all that to go up to 33.6K. That was huge. And then the 56Ks came out, and there was two different flavors of those. We had to have two different flavors. So we had to truck roll those out twice. And then we had three different flavors of ISDN two different flavors of ISDN at 64K. And then DSL came along with that very early DSL came out 5 different flavors. So like when people tell me that this is the last technology, I'm like, oh, fuck off. Yeah. It's not going to happen, right? So you don't understand technology. You think this is the last technology.
So, Steve, you co-founded Pipe Networks with Bevan Slattery, who, alongside yourself, is recognised as one of Australia's leading entrepreneurs and founder of NextDC. So you could say a pretty good choice of a co-founder. How did you navigate finding the right co-founder and then building a team from there? There's a lot of people listening out there who have an idea, searching for a co-founder. What advice would you have for them?
And I guess in particular, Bryce and I are co-founders. So any advice for us?
It's a fraught relationship. So between Bevan and I, so we literally we're about the same age, but a grade apart in school. We used to play tennis on a Saturday morning together, and mums were best mates and worked together. So we knew of each other. When I moved back to Brisbane, Bevan contacted me and he was trying to raise some money for a thing that looked a bit like Pipe, but wasn't quite Pipe, and we had to change it quite a bit. And that was just as the 99 2000 tech wreck was just descending and murdering things, so it was really hard to raise money. And from that, we decided to throw that to change how it actually the business plan and get into it. But back when I started, we used to call ourselves sort of this co-founder thing and CEO. We used to be like business partners and managing directors. All the boring old stodgy terms. We got funkier terms. They're entrepreneurs. So co-founders in general. So one of the biggest risks we have when we invest. So there's lots of questions in there. How do we scale? So I think we stayed the same size at Pipe. We come to Jesus moment because we had, I think, 8 or 10 months worth of rent free in the place we got in Brisbane, and that just made us lazy. We used to go to long lunches and who cares about customers, type of thing. It wasn't quite that bad, but as his rental payments were approaching us, we knew we had to actually get probably pretty serious in the business, and we were sort of lucky at the time that a few things fell on our laps, and we managed to find some good people. We went through, we didn't keep all staff. It was definitely a journey where we cycle people out, that's for sure. And in general, the co-founder dynamic. Okay, the lack of a co-founder for people for investors such as myself is interesting. We rarely ever have. In about 60 companies, probably done 3 times, have a single founder.
Wow.
Okay. There's just way too much risk there. So, and then when you do get multiple founders, you've got to make sure you get that balance right at the same time. So, there's ways you can line that up. I always like having in the core founding group having the appropriate technical skills. People think I demand tech everywhere. I don't. You need the technical skills in the core founding group. You need the person who knows how to build this thing again, equity incentivized. So that's what it's really about. So it's good to have a mix of skills if you can, business versus tech, et cetera, operations. That's, the balance rarely happens in life, if you know what I mean. There's always a bit of a compromise, but that's life's a compromise. And then when that relationship goes bad, I mean, it can go stratospherically bad. We've had some, I've got some legal agreements. I just can't talk about some, to be honest, because we had to actually march people out. I can't say nasty things about the pricks, excuse me, so I won't use their names. But the ones we don't have non-disparagement agreements with, there's been a couple. I shouldn't say. There's been a couple of pleasant ones where the teams have just got together and said, "Look, we can't do this. Can't work together." They've had this amazingly amicable split.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. And I would say that happens 1 in 4 times.
Yeah.
the other 3 and 4 times, the stress of a business adds up, and stress does weird things to people. It comes out at 90 degrees. There's a physical force called in gyroscopy called precession. So if your wheel's running really fast and you push it, that force actually comes at 90 degrees to the right. Stress is like that. You push a person a certain way, it comes in a weird direction, and you can't blame them. A person under stress in a business that maybe not hitting its targets, you can't judge them on that day, because that's not their best days, right? So you need to manage that process and manage it well. A lot of it comes down to the setup before, where you want to make sure that the equity incentives are correct. So we're talking about vesting here, and other bits and pieces. So there's ways you can mitigate founder bombs. But sometimes you just need to put a big black dog of a lawyer onto one and walk them out of the business, basically.
Fair enough. Well, I'll make sure I get my lawyer onto Bryce before he gets onto mine. Steve, you mentioned there pipe networks. You sort of were working on it 1999, 2000, 2001 in the darkest days of the first tech boom. And I imagine, you mentioned that raising money was really hard. We're seeing that 2022 is shaping up to be quite difficult as well. Yeah, a lot of companies, especially in the States, but now in Australia as well, struggling to raise money, having to freeze hiring, lay people off. Do you have any advice? Have you been sharing any advice with your portfolio companies? Any advice for any budding entrepreneurs listening?
Well, it's really weird for how big a smash these things tend to be. They tend to... They're pretty slow motion things. They happen over weeks and months, right? It's not all of a sudden you wake up one day and Dow's down 30. That's taken 6 weeks, which is pretty slow motion. Yeah. And we're actually in the US 3 weeks ago, late May, mid-May, late May, and when the Nasdaq fell 4.5% in a day. We had these people coming in and talking about the markets, and it was just ashen-faced people coming and talking to us. There's also we raised, so we couldn't raise money. Actually, the initial pipe networks business plan needed massive alterations and change anyway, and it was a pretty good plan in the end. And even then, on day 2 we changed it, and day 3 we changed it, as you do with business plans. And we end up, I think Bevan was trying to raise $2.5 million, and then we end up funding it with about 150 grand a piece. I mean, it might have been 70. I think our loans got to be the most of about 300 grand. I think I want to say between us. So we didn't need everything. But once we actually started selling, we got less lazy. We started selling, and we got money. And it was actually a bloody profitable business, to be honest. It was a really nice business. But what we're recommending people do is to understand their runway. Use this as an opportunity to potentially take care of problems inside their business. Shoot deadwood staff essentially, and clear up anything that you possibly can. Get some runway behind you. Start getting back to the basics of unit economics about how you're going to survive 2 years with no fundraising. That, and if you can, and we said the same at the start of COVID at the same time, right? Remember the dark old days of March, April, May 2020, where everyone thought half the world was going to die, right? So thankfully that didn't turn out to be the case. But we gave similar advice then that we're not through this yet, but there's a real market correction going on. But in our space, you've had the crossover guys come in. The last 3-4 years have been amazing sort of disruption. Yeah. So you had the initial crossover, one term, SoftBank with their Vision Fund, with like $100 billion fund, for God's sake, came in and just upset the apple cart. And then Tiger and the other crossover guys came along and said, hold my beer. And these guys are doing in 2021, they did a deal a day. Yeah. Wow. In 2020. So, and they literally have a 10-minute phone call and offer like a $50 million term sheet.
How good.
I know.
What everyone has come to realise is they also, on the back end of that, they had deployed Bain or some consulting group, BCG or some consulting group, to go in and basically hyper-research the sector, hyper-research the 10 best opportunities, and then turn up like cowboys and just go,
Yeah, but they've been smashed this year, so I think they're probably not going to be doing that anytime soon.
Well, when we were in the Valley a few weeks back, the level of gloat in so many people about how bad Tiger had been smashed was palpable.
Yeah.
Gee. So, Steve, you've been a prolific investor here in Australian startups through Right Pedal Studios, River City Labs, and now your current work at 1013. How would you assess the current state of Australia's startup scene?
Oh, wow. Asked me that in December last year. It would have been
I know.
And look, as we speak right now, there's actually a VC conference happening up at Noosa. I want to say in Noosa, Sunshine Coast somewhere. Half our team's there. They're all lolling off to Noosa. God bless them. So, people are there's still money out there. So, if you're aware of in the startup space, it revolves around raising money, to be honest. And a lot of that comes from the standard venture capital model where these guys go and they'll raise from limited partners big piles of money that they've got to deploy over 3 to 5 to 10 years, whatever it might be. And that's what they call the dry powder. That's how much dry powder they've got. So there's a lot of that lying around because there's a lot of money raised last year that hadn't been deployed yet. So, how they will deploy that will be interesting. Obviously, the VC firms, a VC fund's job is to deploy capital to charge fees in order to get to run their business. They're there to invest money. So ours is a little different with 1013. So we raise on a deal by deal basis. We have 560 investors in our syndicate, LPs for want of a better term. And we put a deal by deal to them at the moment. And we did, and we were small, we talk about the stats, and we did $2 million in the first year, which is our first 3 months of we'll talk calendar years. And the second one we did 12, and then we did 40. And we'll probably do 40 this year as well. So I don't think going from 12 to 40 was a good effort.
That's big, yeah.
Yeah. We also had one exit along the way, which is great. So last year we sold a company called ClipChamp, or Microsoft acquired a company called ClipChamp that we had our portfolio. There was our 1013 investors were in that. I was in it for the 2 previous rounds as well. So you get to shake out. Like I said, the answer I would have given you maybe in just January, February, probably before Putin did his stupidity, would have been a lot different to the answer now. And now, given the fact that finally, the money printing part is over and now the hangover is going to set in, so inflation's yet to kick in. There's been a lot of pressures out there, but at the same time, then there's lots of historical parallels about these times in the market, like the 2000s. Google, Google got funded in '98, but there's a lot of great companies came out during the first .com boom and actually powered through. Yeah. Same as with during the GFC at the same time. There was a lot of good value was created in that period of time because it also obviously creates opportunity that people can exploit. And we're long-term investors. Most of our portfolio have got enough runway to sort of get themselves through 18 months, 2 years. So we can wait it out, and we're still pretty big believers in it. So far as in Australia is concerned, the Australian startup scene, the Australian funding scene is good. You have the likes of Blackbird and Airtree raised just scad loads of money. There are tons of smaller funds out there as well. They have the innovative funders ourselves, and there's another lady called Cheryl Mack. She runs Aussie Angels as well. She's doing something very similar. You've got Kylie Fraser from Flying Fox Ventures does something very similar. So there's some innovation in that space there, which is nice in so far as funding models is concerned.
Yeah.
We are well placed with successes. So the likes of Canberra, Atlassian in Brisbane here, Octopus Deploy, if you come across those guys, they came out of nowhere to be like a $1 billion valuation. Yeah. You've got Go One here in Brisbane. They just raised at 2.2 billion right in the middle of the smash. So they double their barrel right in the middle of the smash. So yeah, I think that's proof point that if you're doing okay, and then you can actually raise money, and you can raise it on a good lick. Yeah. On what you're doing before. So I think if you're winning, you're not so much affected. And if you're still trying to improve your business model, you're probably in a world of hurt.
Yeah. Now, Steve, we can't talk about your career as an investor without talking about Shark Tank. I think for people who weren't intimately involved in technology or aware of it.
It was on Channel 10. No one watched it. It's all right.
No, I can say that Bryce and I watched it, and we pitched a very half-baked idea that never got past the very beginning. And we're very glad that we didn't get on. But we were watching. But I guess as an investor, what did you learn from your time as a shark? What did you think of the Shark Tank experience, I guess?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, anyone who says they don't like celebrities probably never had it. As a pure selfish way, it's great. So, but it did come with some downsides. The positives more than outweighed the negatives. The experience on reflection taught me a fair bit of humility because you can be flippant when people come and pitch you, and you sometimes get pitched that off, and you just want to you can be a little bit. Inappropriate, but I mean, these people are not only that pitch in front of you, but literally, if they get a bad TV out of this, it could wreck their business. So you've really got to do the right thing and understand the equation that was and probably didn't understand it sort of halfway through the first season. That's at play there. That Channel 10's after a good piece of TV, that startup's after a really good TV ad, and I was actually after a good deal, to be honest as well. So there's a fair bit of tension at play there. Channel 10, I think, did Endemol Shine and Channel 10 between them did a really good job. They portrayed it quite honestly. There's a few things, it was never out of order. There was a few things they probably overemphasised. They're out to make dramatic TV, and mostly, an investment pictures are pretty bloody boring things. So good luck to them, right? So, but loved it. Lots of people gave me amazing access to various parts of this, the investment and business in Australia that I wouldn't have otherwise got. So I'm very thankful for it.
Yeah, nice. Well, Steve, there's plenty of entrepreneurs in our audience, and you've obviously you've obviously had a lot of pitches come across your desk as well. So what's one thing you wish more startups would do in their pitch process, or perhaps stop doing?
So we see about 120 pitches a month that matter that we would otherwise look at funding, I suppose, of which about 1,000 a year, about 1,200 a year. I probably get to see 250 of those. We have a deal team that filters out to the things that we wouldn't otherwise do. So the question is, why do we filter those out? And what annoys me with pitches? I mean, the pitch decks that are too long annoy the shit out of me.
Do you have
how long's too long?
What's too long?
Longer than about 7-10 pages.
Okay. Nice.
Just tell us what problem you're solving. I used to say, it's very easy, intro, this is the problem. This is, this is the market. This is how we're solving it. This is about us. You know what I mean? This is you might have some stuff, double the size of market. So there's about 5 to 7 areas in which you might do 1 to 2 slides on. Anything more than that, it's just crap. I shouldn't say that, for early stage businesses that have a great deal don't have a great deal of traction. Yeah. So, if your business has a great deal of traction and numbers and some stability to it, then you don't come and pitch me for a start. You pitch a bank manager or something like that, right? Yeah. So, the one thing that will instantly, I don't like people that don't like numbers. And I tell my daughters, I've got a pair of 5 and a 9-year-old, and we've got the times tables up on the wall, and it's a 12 up to 12. It's up to 12, and I call it the square meter of power. And it is. If you can do that in your head and not have to look at it, understand that, you'll be 10 seconds in front of half the people in conversation, because they were still sitting there trying to work out what was what, right? And on small integer mathematics, which is I find personally embarrassing if you can't do it. But I look at numbers and I just go, well, that's wrong. And you can instantly see, just with rules of thumb, you can instantly see what's right and wrong. And then they'll either get indignant, or they'll be wildly wrong. And they can be instantly wrong, and you can chat about that and understand what made their assumptions. That's different to having a lie, or to just not knowing just your trade. Yeah. So mistakes in pitch decks, because when you consider it's a refined product as well, mistakes in pitch decks are really bad. Then there's things like, people sort of say, the one I get the most, and I've got flack over this, I'd love to find the real answer. People say, there's 2 million small businesses in Australia, and I'm like, I've got 6 of those ABNs myself. There's only 10 million households in this country. I sit back and go, there's 9.2. There was a private NBN destroying the market. 9.2 million own lines in Australia. Yeah, which is roughly 10 million households, right? Right, rounded up. And so I sit down and go, is one every 5 households, is that a small business when you consider, the numbers that some businesses of employees some businesses have, and there's 2.4 people per house, and et cetera, you're just like going, I don't know. So people who don't think about the numbers and what it actually means, because it's fundamental to what they're pitching. So you're just getting things wrong in your pitch deck, because let's face it, it's a sexed up lie that you're giving us. It's puffery. It's there to actually convince us that your view on the world is something that we should take care of, and that this problem exists, and we know how to solve it, and we've got the best team over here to solve it too. Yeah. And it's all, they've sexed it up, it's puffed up, it's a legal term, puffery, and we get that. So it's our job to see through it. So we research. So when we get a pitch deck in, we'll research, we'll understand, we'll see past the marketing spin, and try and drill drill it down, excuse me.
Nice.
Love that. Well, if you're an entrepreneur pitching 1013, keep it short, no mistakes, and do not
Sex it up.
say there's 2 million small businesses in Australia.
Maybe don't put any numbers.
Maybe put your 12 times tables.
Yeah.
But Steve, look, one thing that really stood out for us when we were watching Shark Tank was that you are very proud of being from Queensland. You love Queensland. I think maybe you were kinder to entrepreneurs from Queensland. That might be controversial.
No, well, it was true. You need to stick right. It is TV. It is meant to be a bit of fun. And so a few points there. Look, I'm more proud to be an Australian than a Queenslander, but I'm very proud Australian. Carried a rifle for this country for 9 years, so and I'd do it again if they've got really desperate. But have to be pretty desperate, right? So behind that Queenslander, I think it's a lovely state. I go and not only do I live here, but I spend my money here. I until recently I owned property in the Whitsunday holiday house. I've just come back from weeks fishing in the Gulf of Carpentaria. I'm going back again in 3 weeks because it's the best place in the world. I think I wear my causes on my sleeve, to be honest. I exercise my causes from my wallet, I should say. So I don't like people who besmirch Queensland. I think that we. And that goes down to industry as well. So we have lots of farming, we have lots of extractive industries. Australia has lots of farming and lots of extractive industries in general, and I'm actually exceptionally proud of those. And I think it's the stability that allows us to do this other tech stuff, which is great. What was the second part you asked about?
Well, I was going to ask about in 2017 to 18, you were Queensland's chief entrepreneur, and before we were preparing for this interview, we'd never heard of that term before. So, what does a state government chief entrepreneur do?
It's a pretty cool business card. So I was working with I was actually working with the Campbell Newman LNP when he was in power there as well, and about what to do with respect to innovation. This is when I still thought government could actually do something without getting in the way, and I'm firmly disavowed of that notion at this point in time. He didn't win that election, a re-election, I should say. But the Palaszczuk government pretty well took that plan, changed the name, and pretty well did something very similar. So it wasn't too bad. And part of that was we needed like a cheerleader in chief, for want of a term. We needed a focal point, and we ended up sort of brainstorming that into something called the chief entrepreneur, which I was supposed to be the first one, I ended up being the second one. We discovered we're having twins, and my wife said, "You're not going to do that, right?"
Yeah.
Bringing twin babies to the house. So Mark Salby, who was a great first chief entrepreneur from Blue Sky, he was awesome. He was so much energy. He did that one. So, and basically, you get to name your own. You get to make the role whatever you want. So I said, look, I want to do a large multi-day event outside of the Southeast Queensland corner every month. I want to take a whole bunch of entrepreneurs. So I've got my plane, about a slightly bigger plane now, but I had a sort of 7-seater plane back then, and we just put really interesting people in it from Brisbane, and we'd go out to bloody Blackwater and Emerald and Longreach and St George, everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. And we just went to the local Chamber of Commerce or the local business meetup, because most people in business like networking, and I think most people in business should network. But, when you're in Blackwater, you get the same 3 butchers, bakers and candlestick makers at every meeting. And so just bring in fresh, nothing wrong with butchers, bakers and candlestick makers, rah, rah, rah. But you know what I mean? It's the same people. So bring fresh blood in, bring different ideas, and there's no more different idea coming in a regional community with a bunch of people who invest in loss-making startups.
Yeah.
That's something you've got to bend your head around, right? Are we right or are we wrong? History will tell with respect to that. But at least we bought a different set of people to network and to understand and talk. And that was what it was about telling stories and taking stories back. But I wanted to do 3 things. I wanted to do those networking tours. I've got to remember them all now. I want to do change telecommunications in Queensland. So the state had large tracts of unused fibre optic cable running through the Powerlink power grid, the same power grid that can't get us enough electricity to keep our heaters on at the moment. But anyway, and so we were trying to free that up. So that ended up, something happened there, but took way too long, and it was a bit too gutless in the end. Then I wanted to do flying cars. Like I literally thought that have a big, hairy, audacious goal, right? Your BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal. So what's that? So, well, if you literally, the one way to flatten a city, and flatten the city not in a destructive sense, but in a topological sense, to tell it with allegory, I suppose. So there's a lovely place at Noosa called Peregian Beach, right? It's 123 kilometres, I think, as the crow flies, from Brisbane to Bridgend Beach, right? And there's a vehicle maker out there, electric flying vehicle maker called Lilium in the EU, in the EU, Lilium, 300k an hour. So for 23 minutes in one of those vehicles, and for $5.50 worth of electricity, you could live at Bridgend Beach 17 minutes away, 23 minutes away. Excuse me. Now, if you're going to sit half hour on a commute, where would you rather live, Bridgend Beach or half hour through a shitty drive that way, if you know what I mean? So rather than build these huge big ribbons of concrete and steel that just take 10 years to build and then the second day they're open they congest, right? Let's actually think out of the box and do that. And because there's a lot of technology involved, there's a lot of software required. There would be an amazing amount of things that would have to be created to occur. Other jurisdictions are doing it, but I couldn't quite get that across the line. People couldn't quite picture having. I used to say, when was the last time you were 50 meters away from another car on a freeway? Never, right? And sometimes you're within a meter of them and almost head on, right? So in a cubic meter of airspace, you can put 4,000 vehicles separated by 50 meters. So not that you would, because that probably seems like a few too many, but it's just amazing. You just get people to think and realign that. And why do we have to live? I want to live half hour away, but why can't that be the Toowoomba Range where it's like 5 degrees cooler every time of the year? Mm-hmm. So that was my big, hairy, audacious goal for chief entrepreneur, and they just thought I was mad, I think, to be honest. So.
I feel like you have to be mad to be the chief entrepreneur, to be an entrepreneur in general.
Love it, Steve. Well, for those that have been listening and would love to follow you or find out more about what you're doing at 1013, are you on any socials? What's the best place to sort of keep up to date?
We have LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to do professional, which is 1013.vc, I think is the domain. Well, the domain is 1013.vc. You just go to LinkedIn and type 1013 in. Nice. I think I'd probably find it. That's at TEN13. Follow me on Twitter. Do that. Do that, but don't blame me. I've got certain right of centre opinions that tend to rub people the wrong way, which is pretty cool. I have Facebook there as well. Steve Baxter or Shark. I think it's Shark Baxter. I know my PR company got it when I was on. I don't know. I just click on the Facebook link and it takes me there. Nice. So. But judging by my haters, I'm not that hard to find, which is pretty cool.
No, it's great. We really appreciate you taking the time. We even more appreciate the fact you came back a second time. We did have some audio issues, so thank you for...
mine, I've got a better... That was my shitty home microphone, so I've got a better microphone here.
We're all good now.
It's all good now. This one, I'm touching wood as I say it, but this one feels like it worked. But Steve, we always like to finish these interviews with the same final 3 questions, so we'll move on to those. The first one is, do you have any books that you consider must read?
Yeah, they're pretty boring to some degree though. So it's E-Myth, Gerber, just foundational if you want to get into business. Very simple book. It could be read by probably a grade 7er, but it's pretty good. I like Angel by Jason Calacanis. He's a lovely chap. He loves himself, and he'll tell you how much he loves himself. But it's a really good book about angel investing. Hard Thing About Hard Things is actually really good.
Yeah, love that.
Otherwise, my favorite books tend to be sort of zombie apocalypse, sort of space sci-fi, and just escapism. So I try because I read contracts and books and blogs all day. The last thing I want to do is do that when I go home.
Yeah.
There's some great book recommendations. We'll include them on our website. Definitely want to echo Hard Thing About Hard Things. I think that was a really good one for us. I love
the culinary advice he gives. Can we say the rude words on this podcast about eating a shit sandwich?
If we can't, we'll get our producer to bleep it in post.
Excellent.
But Steve, second question we like to finish with: forget valuation or them as the company as an investment today. Just purely on what the company does, its fundamentals, its competitive advantage. What's the best company you've ever come across?
Best company I've ever come across. Look, the ones that we founded, I'd have to say Pipe Networks was the most fun I've ever had, to be honest. It was amazing. I worked at Google for a year, right? And Google for the worst place I ever worked, to be truthful. So not much fun there. You can't have fun in chaos, and you can't have... Inefficiency is never fun. I find that I get a lot of, probably from my military background, I get a lot of personal satisfaction from professional fulfillment. And then if you can, wake up and go to work at, 8 or 9 in the morning, finish at 5 or 6 at night, whatever it is, and you know that you've done this, and this, and you go back and you feel fulfilled. And that was almost every day at Pipe. That was, we changed the face of telecoms in Australia. Before we started, the highest speed connection you get at home was 1.5 megabits a second. By the time we finished, it was in the hundreds of megs, and we'd almost drove it instantly to 24 megasecond at the top of DSL. So, Pipe was an amazing company.
Love that. A lot of people answer Google to that question, so I loved that you told us that Google wasn't a great place to work.
A bunch of over-entitled children. Oh my God.
Well, we'll have to get Steve back on to talk about Google and the NBN.
Yes.
That'll be a spicy
That'll
episode.
Be an aftermarket episode.
And the people I work with at Google were fine. Lovely. Everyone's lovely. You never really met an arsehole in the world, but it's when you put them together, or you sort of force systems around them, they tend to, I don't know, just be no fun.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay. Well, and then Steve, final question. If you think back to your early days, founding SENet, or even before then, as a 15-year-old, signing a 9-year contract to join the army. Not sure how you got away with signing a 9-year contract as a 15-year-old, but what advice would you give to your younger self?
With a young family now, it's interesting because I'm thinking more and more about that, right? So I speak a lot at schools. If people was to say, I go to high school, I say, I left the school. People failed grade 11. I failed grade 11, joined the army, and it all worked out. And I thought, that sounds really bad to say out loud in front of a bunch of kids, because it shouldn't be. So I think we're an exceptionally lucky country because you can fail into into something that's pretty good. Right, and I failed on something that was pretty good. I was very lucky, and I'm not saying there wasn't work involved there, but it wasn't. You can recover from poor education or poor choices when you're a young bloke growing up full of hormones and just stupid behaviour, right? So I would say go to university, go back to university, for God's sakes, do it easier. There's easier ways to do what I've done. That being said, I think if you like where you are now, I absolutely love where I am now, mostly because of my family situation with beautiful girls. I wouldn't change a bloody thing. And if we told you how we got that family, it'd be another hour, and it's about every tragedy you can come across. But I wouldn't swap any of that at the same time for where we are now.
Love that.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for joining us for a second time. We certainly appreciate you making the time, and I know that our audience would have taken a lot of inspiration from that episode, particularly those that are at the early stages of their entrepreneur career. So thank you so much.
No, thanks, fellas, and good luck with your business too, eh?
Thank you.
Come pitch me sometime. I look forward to that.
Well, it'll be 4 pages with no numbers, that's for sure.
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.